talk about load before and impact that each foot takes through the rest of your body every time it hits the ground. If you're running with poor technique, that just goes through the roof. And the reality is, through our clinics, we do a lot of running assessments, and 99% of runners have got poor run technique. Poor run technique is a domino effect. So what we try and aim for is that sort of mid to 4 foot strike, where they're kind of making contact with the ground underneath their knee or their hip. So they're skimming the ground as opposed to putting that handbrake on. Research sort of shows every single time that you strike the ground, anywhere between 2 to 3 times your body weight gets put through every single foot, each foot.
That's
every
crazy.
time. Yeah, so if you do a 10K run, that adds up, right? And you need to have the strength and the mobility to be able to deal with that.
Have you noticed it? Every second person seems to be signing up for a 10K, half marathon, fun run. People who haven't run in their 20s or even teens, maybe even never run properly at all. Suddenly pounding the pavement 5 days a week, trying to get fit, lose weight and chase that challenge. And while that's a brilliant thing, it also means that we're seeing a number of injuries, whether that be sore knees, plantar pain, stress fractures, tight calves or hips blowing up everywhere. Today we're going to talk about the modern running boom, why it's happening, why injuries are common, and how everyday runners can train smarter. My name's Mitch. I'm the owner of Health Management Dietitians, Accredited Sports Dietitian in Far North Queensland. Our podcast takes a slightly different approach where we're going to look at the practical doing part of the advice we hear. And we're going to have a number of presenters on and people we can talk to that are really highly skilled in their areas and really trying to provide those practical solutions to those everyday problems. Special guest today is Kyle Richardson. Kyle is the Managing Director of F&Q Podiatry and Orthotics in Cairns. He's played hockey at a national level, has a special interest in biomechanical podiatry. He's passionate about supporting people from all ages stay on their feet and contributing to a healthy lifestyle. Kyle works extensively with runners, lower limb injuries, footwear assessment and biomechanics. He sees firsthand what happens when enthusiasm outruns preparation. I've known Kyle for about 10 years now and had the pleasure of working with Kyle at the Taipans and Northern Pride rugby league teams, as well as a number of sort of mutual clients as well. Welcome, Kyle. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Awesome. Now, I think when we're sort of, planning this out, I was thinking, what are we going to cover? Because there's so many different topics we could cover. And I thought everywhere you look, everyone's running. And like, is that something that you've seen in your practice as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think it started during COVID. There was obviously that period of time where gyms were closed, pools were closed. People had to sort of stay within their local government area. So I think their only option to get out and from a mental health point of view and obviously get out and burn some calories was to put the shoes on and go for a run. And I think it's just increased in popularity ever since then. And that's from your young sort of teenage runners all the way through. We're getting people come through our clinics in their 70s and 80s still wanting to go for a run around the block, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And I think particularly in the area that we live in Cairns, obviously with the Ironman and with the climate that we live in, it's very much conducive to getting outside and going for a run. So I think, a lot of people go down and watch the Cairns Ironman and think, I could see myself doing that. And then that sort of starts a spiral effect. So it's fantastic. It's good to see.
It's interesting. Like in our practice, I reckon potentially sort of 5 or more years ago, I reckon it was all about Ironman, triathlon. And whilst that is still very much, a very high level in sort of Cairns. But the running I think has been a massive boom. And I think because a lot of people, they may not have the desire to, to jump on a bike or maybe they're not a swimmer. So, that's the hard part. But everyone can, walk, run. So it's definitely been booming, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think these days a lot of people are time poor. So you think parents with kids, even retirees, you talk to retirees and they've never been busier. So in terms of bang for your buck, in order to get out there, get your heart rate up, burn off some calories, you can't beat running. You can run, you can wake up in the morning, put your shoes on, go for a run. You can run from the office. You can be on holidays and go for a run. So these days, because everyone's time poor, having to drive 15, 20 minutes to the gym or to the pool or jump on the bike and do our 5-hour bike ride, a lot of people can't do that. So I think that's one of the other big reasons as well.
Yeah, definitely. Why are people getting injured is the big question. Let's tackle the big topic right now.
Yeah, look, I think a number of factors with that. I think human nature, I think when we start doing something, a lot of people kind of just jump straight in. And we all know that feeling, well, during a run, probably not, but when you finish a run, you're feeling pretty good. The next day, your legs might be a bit sore, but naturally you get those endorphins flowing and you're like, yeah, that was fun. Let's go again. And I think people naturally go from 0 to 100. And certainly in our clinics, we're lucky enough to work with some professional athletes, professional runners, but the large percentage of patients that we see are sort of your young or middle-aged runners who are just wanting to do a 5K park run or do a half marathon or a full marathon or an ultra. And so sometimes it's your people who are coming in and seeing us who have never run in their lives, but also as well it's people who haven't run for 20 years and want to get back into it. And you think you haven't run for 20 years and then all of a sudden you're doing 4 to 5 runs a week at 30 to 40K total. You feel good for that first month, but we know with obviously research and whatnot that bone and tendons don't like sudden change. They're okay with gradual change, but they get to a stage where they're thinking, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Our load has increased by 300-400%. We're going to get pretty angry about it. And then all of a sudden, that's when people end up coming into our clinic with shin splints, shin stress fractures, Achilles problems, plantar fascial issues, knee pain, hip pain. And a lot of it's simply that. They go from 0 to 100. I think the other thing is as well as with running, I think people underestimate the amount of impact that goes through your body. So research sort of shows every single time that you strike the ground, anywhere between 2 to 3 times your body weight gets put through every single foot, each foot.
That's
every
crazy.
Yeah, so if you do a 10K run, that adds up, right? And you need to have the strength and the mobility to be able to deal with that. And a lot of people, even your people who are really fit and active going to the gym, unfortunately, a lot of people sort of forget about these things from hips down. They're not as important as the biceps and chest
You mean
muscles.
people might skip leg day?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know that, Mitch.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing how many people come in and see us and they can't do 3 sets of 10 or 3 sets of 15 single leg calf raises with good form and technique.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, there's no way in the world that you're going to be able to run any type of distance and be able to do that consistently without getting injured.
Yeah.
Once again, it all links back to everyone's busy. Not a lot of people have got time to do those 1%ers, to focus on your core strength, to focus on your intrinsic foot strength.
Yeah.
And it's not until they get injured that they kind of think, maybe we should have done things a little bit differently.
Yeah. And I just want to bring it back to that, like that 2 to 3 times, your weight essentially every kind of stride. That's significant. And when you think like, a lot of people, they want to get into running or even, walk runs, even just that gradual build up, but they want to get into it because obviously there's a health benefit and potentially a little bit of weight loss benefit to it as well.
Yep.
So it's like a double-edged sword, isn't it? So it's a real gradual build up is what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think patience is key and it's about trying to curb. Yeah. Well, exactly. It's about trying to curb that desire to, let's just get straight into it. I want to be running 10K within 3 or 4 weeks. And some people can get away with it, but the vast majority, if you go from 0 to 100, there's a very good chance that you're going to get injured.
Yeah. And I guess especially if you were maybe a little bit of a runner as a teenager, and you sort of maybe, you tried to progress your career in your 20s or family and, then you think, okay, we're settled now. We're just going to start to get back into it.
Yeah.
And your brain says, I used to be able to do that. This was my time, son, that I used to do. And then,
exactly.
You jump back into it and,
those competitive juices get flowing. And I used to do a sub 20 minutes, 5K park run. Why can't I do that again? I haven't run for 10 years.
Absolutely.
But let's give it a go. It's certainly a double-edged sword. There's no doubt about that.
What do you reckon is probably one of the the most common injuries that you see? And it may not be a severe injury, but I guess maybe even the early stages of a sign that maybe something's not right.
Yeah, I would say probably shin or tibial related issues, mainly bone stress injuries. And I guess that also goes through the forefoot as well with the metatarsals. But no doubt, I would say the most common injury that we would see and it doesn't matter whether you're elite or those everyday Joe blogs that just wanting to do a 5K park run. I think the tibia and the amount of force that gets put through that every single time that you are running, particularly if we have bad technique, there's no doubt. And obviously that's a continuum. It can start off with just really low grade, almost like bone bruising or your standard shin splints that a little bit tender at the start of a run and then they kind of warm up. Then the next step along to that is a bit of a stress reaction where the bone's starting to get, okay, all right, we're not happy. And then it can end up in a stress fracture and also a complete fracture if it's not managed. That's pretty rare. Okay. People normally pull up around that stress fracture point because they can't run through it. So I would say that. But then also as well, like Achilles, particularly for our middle-aged runners, Achilles largely related to calf weakness and tightness. And as podiatrists, obviously we're mainly foot and ankle, but all the way up to knee, hip and lower back. So we get a lot of our middle-aged runners come in just complaining of just generalised lower back and hip pain when they run. And a lot of it's just due to poor shock absorption. Yeah, definitely. And well, let's just pivot a little bit from, I guess, those people that maybe have gotten back into running to, let's pivot to maybe the 14, 15, 16, maybe even 13-year-old runner, doing high Ks, I guess maybe risk of underfueling, which is, I guess, what we see a lot of. Do you see many of them, and what are some things that you start to notice in their injuries? Is it similar around that bone sort of stress fracture, doing high Ks? Yeah, certainly in that age group, certainly even higher bone risk. Tendons, their tendons tend to be a little bit more elastic than a middle-aged runner. But yeah, typically the stress response or stress fracture. Yeah. And I think the challenge is for a lot of runners, young runners these days, is it's becoming more and more popular. There's more and more events. There's a lot more private run coaching groups out there where a lot of kids years ago, they might go for 2 or 3 runs a week and have a few events during the year. But these days, there's so many events on the calendar. So in terms of rest periods, they're few and far between, and they're kind of, I need to push through this niggle because I've got state or nationals coming up in 6 weeks' time, and you get through that, and then all of a sudden, I've got this and this, and the goalposts are always changing. And we know, obviously, dealing with elite athletes, you need to fuel your body appropriately, but you also need to factor in rest to allow the body to recover. Yeah. Because if you just keep adding load, it's going to get to a stage where something's going to break. Do you think, and I think about growing up, I played a lot of football and did a huge amount of swimming, and I was never a runner with my build, that's for sure. But do you think now that kids are doing more and more at an earlier age than maybe what we did growing up? Like, obviously we were active, but, those really kind of structured training programs and development pathways, do you reckon that's more and more? Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of the kids that show potential, they're not just good at running, they're little athletes. Good at everything. So all of a sudden they play their local soccer team, and then all of a sudden someone picks them up and say, hey, come and join our academy. We want you to train for soccer 3 days a week. Okay, well, all right, we're going to fit that in, because obviously as a parent, you want your child you want to give them every opportunity. So you got 3 to 4 soccer sessions a week plus a game. All of a sudden you got 3 to 4 runs a week. The local touch footy side, they're after a fast winger. All right, yep, let's do a training session and a game there. Yeah. So all of a sudden, these are the kids that, in our clinics, obviously they're ones that end up with severs, inflammation of the growth plate in the back of the heel. Osgood slatters, same thing with the growth plate through the tibia. And it's just purely due to just overload. And it's the other thing is, as well, as often those kids who are showing potential, they're little athletes, that they don't sit still. So they're doing all that outside of school. It gets to lunchtime, they're not the ones sitting in the library playing chess.
No.
They're outside playing footy, they're playing tag, they're doing whatever.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you look at their cumulative load over a week and you kind of sort of, well, no wonder why you're injured.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes it's about talking to the parent just as much as the child, because you need to get them on board first and be like, do you understand that this is too much? We need to pull back a little bit.
Yeah.
Even for a period of time, and then scale.
Yeah, for sure. It's a hard conversation because you've got, as you said, the kid are good at everything. But how do you, when they start to get into the development pathways, it sort of starts to narrow down that sport a little bit more, hey?
Yep, and that's happening at an earlier age now. Okay. So development pathways 10, 15 years ago would start 13, 14, 15, whereas now development pathways, particularly with your more well-known sports, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, where they're skeletally immature, their muscles and tendons haven't had time to develop. So I think that also plays a role. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Let's turn a bit of attention to like biomechanics because, obviously we talked a little bit about load and, obviously going too hard, too quick and how that can obviously inflame and aggravate everything and start to cause those injuries. But, you could do everything loading right, but if mechanically you're a pretty poor runner in terms of your technique, that's got to be another factor as well, hasn't it?
100%. Yeah, we talk about load before and impact that each foot takes through the rest of your body every time it hits the ground. If you're running with poor technique, that just goes through the roof. And the reality is, through our clinics, we do a lot of running assessments, and 99% of runners have got poor run technique. And I think as a kid, and you crawl, you walk, you start running, and that's what running is, right? It's not unless you've had any type of technical run coaching that technique really comes into it. And a lot of the times these days, I think, kids are, the longer I stride, the further I'm going to go, the quicker I'm going to go, when really that's kind of counterintuitive. And obviously we do a lot of run technique work with our patients, and there's even though we've got a key set of variables that we work on in terms of, okay, this is what we sort of want to be seeing, all you need to do is look at professional marathon runners, like look at the London Marathon on the weekend. These are elite guys, and they've all got different run technique. Because it depends on their biomechanical structure, depends on a whole host of different things. So it's not just trying to pigeonhole a runner into this is exactly how we want you to run. It's just about tweaking it. And a lot of runners that we see, they've got a very low cadence, so number of steps per minute. So they're taking really long strides. And the further that you stride out in front, the more likely that your leg is going to extend, right? Like the two come hand in hand. Because it's a domino effect. The further that you're striking the ground out in front, the more likely you're going to make contact with your heel. And with running, obviously, you want to have as much forward momentum as possible. You want to avoid too much sort of vertical translation, and you definitely want to avoid anything that's going to push you back. And when you think about it, striking with your heel, it's like putting the handbrake on. So straight away, you're taking long strides, you're out in front, your ankle's fixed and your knee's fixed. And the whole reason why we have ankles and knees is they're our shockies. So all of a sudden, they're striking all the way out in front. The amount of pressure and force that gets sent through the ankle up into the tibia, up into the femur, and then hips and lower back increases significantly. And guaranteed 99% of our run techniques that we do, that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
I think the other factor is there's never been a point in time where humans are sitting more. So whether you're sitting in class, at work, in the car on the way to school or work, and when you're in a seated position, your hip flexors tighten. And when your hip flexors tighten, naturally your pelvis sort of tilts forward and you're kind of chasing yourself. So your center of mass is out in front, not underneath. And when that happens, that often leads to that heavy heel strike as well. So a lot of the times that's what we're seeing. And so therefore from a practical point of view, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get them to run more efficient. And yes, that makes them quicker, which is obviously great. But most importantly for us, it reduces the risk of injury. Well, it helps their injury at that point in time, but also we want to have runners running for the long term. And if we can get them running efficiently, that more often than not helps. So that remember how I was saying before how poor run technique is a domino effect, but good run technique and coaching is, because often you fix a couple of key variables. Often a lot of these things take care of themselves. So a few things that we sort of focus on straight away: increasing cadence, so getting them to run with shorter, quicker steps. And obviously, I'm not talking about sprinting here. When we're sprinting, that's complete. I'm talking if you're doing a 5K, 10K, 40K run, where you're sort of at through the mileage, sort of that midsection of the run. So shorter, the quicker the step, and naturally, what happens then is your contact comes back further. And a lot of people talk about a 4-foot strike, running up on your toes. That's very challenging to do if you're purely just a heel striker. So what we try and aim for is that sort of mid to 4-foot strike, where they're kind of making contact with the ground underneath their knee or their hip. So they're skimming the ground as opposed to putting that handbrake on every single time. And what happens is then at contact, rather than that leg being extended, it's got a little bit of flexion. So all of a sudden, your shockies, your ankles, your knees, they're kicking into gear. So all of a sudden, your bone stress and tendon load reduces significantly. So it's, increasing the cadence, trying to aim for a mid to 4-foot strike, trying to get the knees up at the front a little bit more, because as soon as you increase step rate, everything becomes a bit of a rush. So often they tend to shuffle.
Yeah.
By lifting the knees at the hips, it just gives more time through swing phase to allow for a bit of contact. Yeah. So that's, and obviously we don't want people kicking themselves in the chin with their knee, but it's just lifting their knees.
They're doing well if they're doing that.
Yeah, it's getting them to lift their knees up to allow adequate swing phase time to then make contact with the ground. And you'll hear it on the treadmills in our clinic. They go from a thud, thud, thud to sort of skimming the treadmill, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. I was just going to say, do you sort of do that on the treadmill in the clinic and then really work through? Yep. Yeah. How does it? Yeah.
Yeah. So we start off, we video their natural sort of run form, and we've got gait analysis software, and we can visualize it up on the screen. Then we sort of analyze that. Then we don't want to change things overnight. We'll often focus on 2 or 3 things, get them to go away and work on it, come back, we reassess. And obviously, you've been running the way that you've been running for a long time. I'm not going to tell you to go for a 5K run and focus on all these things immediately. As we spoke about gradually building into a cumulative load, the same thing goes for run technique. So often we kind of say, okay, for the first minute, I just want you to run normal, forget about it. And then from minute 1 to 2, I want you to switch on and focus on step rate, focus on strike pattern, then switch off. And then week 1, week 2, if everything's going well, 1 minute off, 2 minutes on. Because if you have someone going from a huge heel strike to a mid to 4-foot strike, yes, overall they're more efficient, but think of the calf muscle, for example. Its workload increases naturally. So you don't want to fix their shin pain, but then cause a calf tear. So it's that delicate balance that as practitioners we've obviously got to be able to work with. And fundamentally as well, this is really key. We need to make sure that they're strong enough to be able to make these changes. Yeah. Because if I've got a runner that can't do 15 single leg calf raises, there's no way in the world I'm going to change their technique. We need to work with them in the rehab gym, get them stronger to then allow them to move forward properly.
Do you get many people come and see you like that maybe self-identify and go, hey, I'm a useless runner. I need to get this fixed because I don't want an injury? Like, do people come in before, or is it like, I've got an injury, now I need to actually focus on it? Yeah,
so more now than ever. Yeah. So I think a lot of people these days, because running's so popular, often all on their Instagram pages, all following runners and everything like that. So there's a lot of people coming in saying, hey, I'm completely pain-free. I just want to have a look at my technique and see. And some people are good, but the majority there are things that we can improve on. Yeah.
Let's cover shoes. We've talked about this and you know, like I was fully aware of like, you know, the max cushion type shoes, which we'll cover them first, I think.
Yep.
But there's another type of shoe that maybe I live in, you know, La La Land, but I didn't even know this was a thing, and it's pretty cool. But let's cover the max cushion shoe, because I guess the progression of, you know, what I think about just your normal, you know, Asics Kayano, you know, or similar branded type shoe that most people would have if they're doing a bit of running, just a standard, you know, good quality shoe. And then obviously we've got the max cushion type shoes that have come on the market. Let's talk about them and give me a bit of a rundown on what's available and what maybe an everyday punter should go for versus that high-end runner?
Yeah. Look, I'm not aware of any other industry other than the footwear industry where there's such a big swing in trends. So when I graduated, when was that? 2011. That was sort of halfway through that barefoot sort of minimalistic footwear sort of craze where people were getting around in shoes with, it was literally just upper and outer sole. There was no
and then your toes poke into like certain
the 5
slots.
Yeah, we won't get started on that. Sort of. But then now, fast forward sort of 15 years or so, it is literally the complete opposite. So back then, it was all about trying to get making shoes as light as possible. So trying to take all this material out to allow natural sort of foot function, which for some people was good. But for the vast majority, it caused some problems. Now they found these new sort of super foams that are incredibly light, where they're able to put a whole heap of material in the midsole of the shoe without compromising on the weight. And naturally, when people try these things on, they go in, they're like, oh, they feel incredibly light. Doesn't even feel like anything's in the shoebox. They try them on, they feel like they're walking on clouds and pillows. So, and a lot of them are up to 40 mil thick. So when we talk about stack height, we're basically talking about the thickness of the midsole. So with a shoe, you've got the outer sole, midsole, and then the upper. And then there's obviously your heel drop that comes into it, which is the difference in thickness at the back of the shoe compared to the front of the shoe. But yeah, so I guess it probably started with Hoka years ago, and also that slight sort of rocker sole in the shoe, with the whole idea being the shoe sort of helps to propel you forward, which therefore reduces load through the rest of your lower limb. Now, all of a sudden, all your footwear brands have sort of jumped on board, and you walk into a footwear store now, it's very, very difficult to find a running shoe that doesn't have a high stack height. Which a lot of people love the feel of, and there's benefits to it, but there's also some challenges as well. If you've got someone that's got a very unstable foot type, particularly a bigger sort of build person, if they've got a tendency to want to roll and sprain their ankle, all of a sudden they're running in these big, thick shoes. And like anything, the higher you are on any platform, the more unstable you are. And then what happens is because these foams are so light and soft, naturally they compress quicker. So a lot of your running shoes that even 4 or 5 years ago used to be rated at, say, 850 kilometres before the material density was no longer functioning the way that it should. Now, a lot of these shoes are between 500 and 600 K. So you've got a bigger person who's unstable running on this soft cloud, all good for the first 2 months, but then all of a sudden, once that shoe starts to compress, and more often than not, it compresses on the outside, then all of a sudden they're starting to roll their ankle and throw their knee out and all these types of things. So, yeah, it's certainly interesting. And where does the footwear industry go in the next 10 years? God only knows.
I reckon there's probably a lot of parents maybe of that sort of junior athlete that's maybe getting into running, doing high Ks, they've spent the money on a good shoe, and 3 months later they've done, a bucket load of Ks, and they're reaching that point, and they may not know that the life of that shoe is, the shoe looks good, but it's not as comfortable, and then increasing their injury risk. Yeah,
100%. And there's never been a point in time where running shoes have just been more designed just for straight line running. And so you've got an active 10-year-old kid that plays handball at school, soccer, all these types of things. They've got these high, thick shoes, really light, and a really flexible upper that isn't very durable because it's designed for straight line running. All of a sudden they're doing handball, and by term 2, they've busted out the side of the upper. That's not necessarily the shoe's fault, because it's designed for straight line running or relative straight line running. It's not designed for going like this. So all of a sudden then the parent then walks back into the footwear store and they're up for another $260. So so there's advantages, but there's also some disadvantages and things that people need to keep an eye on.
I'm going to use a real life example. Like, my daughter plays netball, and we wanted just a shoe because she does a little bit of running too, and so we got a nice pair of Asics. But I can already tell, based on what you've just said, there's a lot of flexibility in that upper shoe. That if she's doing the sideways sort of movements or those quick stops, playing netball, that shoe's not going to last,
Yeah,
is it?
and then the alternative is you buy a netball shoe.
Yeah.
But then it's not necessarily designed for day-to-day use for school.
And it's real solid in that upper.
Exactly.
Who would have thought? You knew what you're talking about. Yeah.
So all of a sudden then you're kind of left, shoes are getting so specific for their individual needs, which for some people are great, but for an active kid, parents can't go out and buy 3 or 4 different pairs of shoes every 6 months because obviously they grow.
Yeah.
So it is a real challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's cover let's talk about what you were telling me before about obviously the marathon, breaking the 2-hour barrier. Let's use that, and then obviously let's talk about what shoes they are wearing.
Yes. Yep. So for those that aren't aware, the London Marathon was on the weekend and it was sort of literally record-breaking, revolutionary. So 2 Adidas runners broke the 2-hour mark, and not only, I think it was 1 hour, 59, 30 seconds, so well and truly smashed it. I feel sorry for the guy who came second. He broke 2 hours, which has always been
You'd think if you break 2
a lot
hours,
of people
you win.
did not expect that it was going to be possible, and he did it and came second. And this just shows where the footwear industry is going, and obviously it's a big race between Adidas and Nike. It's that sort of Ford Holden sort of mentality where they've been investing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars into trying to get there first. And obviously a Nike runner did it in 2019, but that wasn't accredited because he had paces and these types of things. So this is the first time it's been done. And they were running in carbon-plated shoes. And carbon-plated shoes have been around for some time now. And there's a lot of advantages to running in carbon-plated shoes, but same thing with these high stack height shoes. There's also some disadvantages. But obviously the advantages of a carbon-plated shoe, they're incredibly light and incredibly light. So any carbon-plated shoe is light, but this particular shoe that was worn on the weekend, the Pro Evo 3, they're 97 grams.
That's crazy.
97 grams in a pair of shoes. So incredibly light and incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And so there's been a lot of research out there in terms of trying to work out, well, how much quicker and how much efficient do these shoes make you? And the research sort of says anywhere between 3 and 5%.
Yeah.
Which you think over a marathon, that adds up. They really try and help to propel you forward. They've got that aggressive sort of rocker sole, so they help with that sort of forward motion. And they're really spongy underfoot as well. They've got those super foams, but to a whole new level, surrounding this carbon plate. So they're like running on a pillow. The disadvantages is you need to pick, unless you're an elite runner, you need to pick and choose when you wear them. And well, first of all, you need to have the appropriate run biomechanics. If you've got that typical run form that I was talking about before, heavy heel strike, and you run in these shoes, you're going to get injured. And there's a lot of research ongoing at the moment, and as it stands right now, there's no conclusive evidence to come out to say carbon-plated shoes increase the risk of injury in runners. There's a lot ongoing at the moment, but the popular theory between biomechanists, physios, podiatrists, sports doctors is that if they're not worn in the appropriate situation, which they aren't a lot of the times, they do increase the risk of injury. Because these days, once again, with social media and things like that, you've got your 12 and 13-year-olds that are seeing what these guys did on the weekend. They're like, Mum and Dad, I want a pair of these shoes.
Absolutely.
They go out and buy these shoes and they're wearing them for their 40, 50K week. That's not what they're designed for. So they're designed for race day, obviously, and they're designed for shorter, sharp sort of work. And if you've got really good run form, then you can use them more during the week. But a lot of the people who are buying them simply don't have that. We spoke about before about durability of a shoe. This particular shoe on the weekend, the materials have been designed as a one race shoe. So
not good for mum and dad with a 13-year-old runner?
Not good for mum and dad. So I'm literally talking the materials in this shoe have been designed for around 50 to 60 kilometres of running before they start to wear out. And to give you an idea, these shoes off the shelf, around 750 Australian dollars.
Gee whiz.
So, but same thing again though, these guys have just run sub 2 hours in the London Marathon. There is going to be an influx of people going out and buying these shoes to shave 20 seconds off their park run or whatever.
Yeah.
And it keeps people like us busy.
Well, it's kind of like, when you go in the golf club and, your 20 handicapper's got the $5,000 set of golf clubs and the brand new driver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you talking about yourself?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. That's me.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting landscape. And running shoes now, the research that's out there and consumers come in. We have patients coming in who know almost just as much about shoes as what we do because they research. They're like, oh, what about this? What about this heel pitch? What about this stack height? The information's there and runners are absorbing it all in. It's just there are situations where they can have great run form and technique, but if they don't have the right shoes for what they're doing and for their biomechanics, you do get injured. There's no doubt about it. So, and there's a lot of podiatrists out there. Same with the barefoot minimalistic shoes that are completely against the idea. We certainly aren't. I feel like they've well and truly got their place. They're an amazing shoe. Look at what just happened on the weekend. But it's just for majority of people, they just need to be very, very careful. We went to Japan for Christmas and walking around Universal Studios, the amount of teenage kids that I could see just walking around in $500 carbon-plated shoes. And I'm just thinking, like, what about their growth plates? What about their tendons? What about their bones? And they're just wearing them for casual walking. They're designed as a technical running shoe. So that's just an example there. Just before Christmas, I had a gentleman came in. He's sort of in his mid-50s. He's always been sort of like a 5K park runner, a cumulative load over the week, probably 10 to 15K. All of a sudden wanted to do a marathon. That was the goal. Went out and bought a pair of carbon-plated shoes, and they were what he was wearing for 50, 60K weeks. He had really poor run form. He was a big unit, probably 115, 120 kilos. And when we were doing the running assessment, you could just see the pressure and shock that was just going straight up through his ankles, up into his lower back and hips. And he had lower back hip pain. He had anterior knee pain. He had shin pain. He had Achilles pain. And a lot of it was a run technique, but he went from a pair of shoes similar to your Kayanos or whatnot, like a moderate stability shoe with a fair bit of cushioning but no carbon plate, but overnight went from doing 50K a week in something like that to then all of a sudden doing 50K a week in a carbon-plated shoe. That's just a recipe for disaster. Where I sort of said, okay, well, like, keep these shoes. These are great, but wear them for your shorter, sharp runs to get used to them and wear them for race day. Because same thing, these weren't like the ones that were worn on the weekend where they were sort of single-use or single marathon shoe. These were rated to around 300 kilometres. But if you're doing 60 Ks a week and they're only rated to 300 kilometres and they're a $400 pair of shoe.
Expensive little,
exactly, it's an expensive
running
hobby.
Used to be fairly cheap.
Yeah, it's not now.
No.
Well, it can be.
Yeah, it can be, yeah.
So it's it's always, a lot of the time with our team of podiatrists, it's about sort of sitting down with the patient and kind of working out what their expectations are. We like to ask, like, what do they know about carbon-plated shoes? And it's interesting to see some people are really well versed and others have got no idea. They just, I just want to buy them because the top guys are wearing them.
Yeah.
Then it's about kind of unpacking some of the myths and we very rarely put a line through it. It's just about, okay, well, let's work on these things first and then we'll cross that bridge.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, form is more important than footwear. Yeah. You need to have, if you've got good run technique, you're strong and mobile through your lower limbs, that gives us a really good foundation to be able to say, okay, well, yeah, look, let's give this a go.
Yeah.
But if you haven't got that, that's where, you're just going to go one step forward, 10 steps back.
That probably leads us into, I guess, just finishing up with a couple of kind of really key points. And you probably already nailed the first one is, form and technique is probably one of the most important.
Yep.
What are some other, key things that you think are really important with running?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is making sure you're strong and mobile first.
Yeah.
And it's, as human nature, we just want to get into it. We want to get out and do those 40, 50K weeks and burn those calories, lose that weight and look and feel better. But I think sometimes it's about sort of taking a step back and saying, okay, well, yeah, that's my goal. What steps do I need to take to get to that? And often that is based around purely lower limb strength and mobility work. So rehab work in the gym or prehab work in the gym, yoga and Pilates is fantastic. A lot of our runners, we recommend Reformer Pilates because it builds on your building blocks, your foundations, and your 1%ers. Once you've got that all sorted, everything kind of takes care of itself. The other thing I think is just being patient and slow and steady increase. Also mixing up your training. Like if you're just doing the same type of running all the time, that in itself can lead to bone and tendon related problems, whereas variability is good. So if you've got 4 runs over a week, don't just do the same run all the time on the same surface. Add in a trail run there. Yeah. Do a longer run. Do a shorter, sort of sharper session to focus on those sort of faster twitch fibers. Mm-hmm. It's just about trying to make sure that you're covering all bases and you're not just doing the same thing consistently and workload going through the roof.
Yeah.
And I think more often, and obviously run technique, if you don't know what your run technique is like, which most people don't, just get it assessed.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might just take 1 or 2 consults and then they're kind of humming along quite nicely.
Yeah.
And I find it the most rewarding part of our role is being able to work with a runner where they come in and we can show them before and afters.